In this section, we're going to talk marketing research more in depth, the actual doing of the research. Keep in mind that there will also be a lot of separate sections for the respective data collection methods, but in general, we're going to be going through that 5-step research process. So here it is, the 5-step research process. As with any plan, we start with formulating what our overall goal is, determine our approach by analyzing our situation, select the tools that will support our approach, and then actually implement the plan and see how it's going. So steps are the following. First, we define the problem. As said, no reason to do research if you don't even know what you want to do or what you want to learn. Implicit in this is that your questions should be able to eventually lead to marketing actions. Step 2, develop the research plan. If we have a well-defined problem, then it's simpler to understand the type of data or information we need to answer that question. This step also entails deciding what method we will use to collect data based on the resources available to us. The third step is to actually collect that information. This is where we actually put our plan into action, where we actually go out and collect the data we need. We go out and do those interviews, record information on security cameras, or put those counters on the doorways or over the doorways. Step 4. The fourth step is developing findings. In this section, we analyze the data we have. That is, we try to see what it means and then communicate our findings. Again, if we wrote a good problem, this should be simpler because at the least, it must speak to our original problem. Step 5 is to take those marketing actions, where we actually see if the recommendations derived from the findings should be followed and how so. We will be going through each step in turn. Remember to feel free to skip around or return as needed. There's ample information to make sure you have what you need to conduct your primary research for yourself. Here we are, step 1 now, defining the problem. What is the problem or decision that could use data? To that end, you need to understand not only what the problem is, but what does it suggest for a type of research you can do? What information do I need? The marketing research project often starts with a management-related decision. Which strategic business unit should get more money? Should we make an alliance with an additional supplier? Which customer group is more costly to serve, and is it due to our price negotiation practices? This leads to the marketing research problem. That is, what type of market research will give me the information I need to make my decision? Once you have that, you can figure out your actual objectives, your research objectives. So here's a book example. Which of these 2 new Lego designs should be selected for production and marketing? So that is an example of a managerial problem in need of research to give it data. Step 2, we actually go about deciding what the research project should look like by developing our research plan. So the research plan is determined by first our constraints, usually money or time, but it can also be something like we need to keep our idea top secret, so we cannot just ask every customer on the street lest our competitor sees. Other constraints may be things like it's hard to find our population, or that we have to take extra care when we use children as research participants. Another consideration for developing the research plan is the information needed to answer the problem. We can broadly consider this in terms of the actors we need to study, so whom are we studying? So it's usually a target market, but it can also be others like employees, such as when tracking drive-through times. We need to look into the behavior we want to say, so what was done? So is it something like actual purchases, or is it more like reports, or whether they would use a coupon? And finally, the context. So this is situation, time, place. What is the situation? So for example, whether the customer is in a hurry or purchasing habits in a convenience store versus a grocery store. As we will discuss in the next sections, certain types of data will also answer different questions. So the methods available that can answer your questions might be limited. Different methods will be suitable for collecting the data we need. What methods we select will be based on the above two considerations over here. For example, we may have little money, so we may only have focus groups for part 1 and surveys for part 2, instead of also incorporating individual interviews. So in this next step, we discuss actually collecting the relevant information. What kinds of data should we collect? In many cases, you often do have data readily available. In other cases, you might need to augment or start afresh with new data that you yourself collect. A part of research is a situation analysis, therefore, where you usually figure out what information you already have. Often this information can be used to provide the answers, or at least some background relevant to the research problem. To better understand what kinds of data should collect, let's talk more about what types of data there are. So we need to know more about the types of data we might need to collect and how they might help. Here are the two major sets we will discuss. First, what is the extent we need secondary data, and what is the extent we need primary data? These data sources determine how we acquire the data, whether it's already been done, or if we have to go and actually design a new project for it. Meanwhile, we have quantitative data and qualitative data. So what types of quantitative data and qualitative data do we need? Each type of data lets us do different things with it and answers different types of questions. So let's review secondary data and primary data. So secondary data is information that already has been collected or published. So it's existing information. It usually was for a different or prior project. Primary data, information specifically collected for a current research project. Quantitative data and qualitative data. These answer different questions. To be specific, quantitative data, data on quantities. They convey numerical differences, numbers, easily aggregated and counted. Qualitative data, data on content like categories or relations. Now let's go over each in turn a little bit deeper and see what it means for us. Remember, data needs based on knowing the question you want to answer. So remember, data needs are based on knowing the question you want to answer. So as a recap, secondary data is information that has already been collected or published, usually for a different or prior project, but it may still apply. Primary data is collected for the particular research project, the problem at hand. You may need both of these to answer the question. You are often and expected to use both for your project. So this chart is meant to show you what we mean by how we find secondary and primary data. As shown, secondary data can be more internal, such as sales records or your own internal benchmarks. It can also be external, where you collect it from other data collection sources like business periodicals, university research announcements, or government reports. Meanwhile, primary data can be found by using many different methods that may involve watching customers and their actions or asking people about stuff. But will I ever use this again? You certainly can. Alumni access as an eventual ULV graduate and the public libraries often have access to databases with a valid library card. Many cities or counties have libraries that also offer this information. It's often available online. You don't have to leave your computer. Many websites like our friend the NAICS or UN Statistics have free information. Right here and in the notes section, I have some websites that will be useful for this class. This is our University of Liverpool Library web portal. There are subject guides that focus on, so we'll say right here, databases, I believe is it, or you can go up here. And effectively, they have subject guides, and not just for marketing. This one is the click to the marketing section, but to all sorts of other ones like anthropology, psychology, sports medicine, law, anything you can think of that Laverne's got. And so there's specifically a marketing section. I highlight Statista because it is very flexible on keywords but industry of choice. So for example, I had a prior group that did Pop-Tarts. They stuck in Pop-Tarts and they got all these things about Pop-Tarts, toasted pastries, all sorts. So lots of flexibility with Statista. And so if you go to the Laverne portal, you just go to this text box right here and search right away, or you can go to any of these sections to find information. And also, there is a chat with us window right here that you can chat 24/7 usually with a librarian. And if not the University of Laverne librarian, they've got others. And they've got plenty of information about finding information sources or types of computer graphics, all sorts of things. So give them a shot. Here are some other sources of secondary data here in the notes. Companies often have this data freely available because they serve as samples. So just kind of like what you learn at Costco, the grocery store, they had the little things, the little toothpicks. Same things with these services. They give samples. So we have places like Gallup, Nielsen, Pew Research Center, Household Products Database. And speaking of some of those, clearly this last one isn't a for-profit, it's a government research associate. So government research is paid for by tax dollars, so it is made accessible for public use, for you. Let's do a quick activity on secondary data. So take a look at these headlines on millennial cereal consumption. This is why millennials actually don't eat cereal. Cereal sales. Millennials think eating cereal is way too, and the baffling reason many millennials don't eat cereal. Really? Millennials probably not too lazy to eat cereal. Cereal tastes nostalgia, looks for its next chapters. Business Insider. Millennials are too lazy to eat cereal. So let's do a quick reflect. What types of reasons do these news articles suggest? So hopefully you've thought a little bit about it. You always have to remember to look at secondary research with a critical eye. Newspapers and opinion pieces are easy ways to collect information, but you gotta sort through them. What types of reasons, for example, were suggested by these newspaper titles? A lot of you took a look and probably thought lots of different ideas. Effectively, they seem to suggest what the connection is and what problems different actors have. As you can see, many of these suggest attributes or habits of millennials. Some challenge the cereal industry. But let's think. What alternative hypothesis could there be? Let's dig in. So major finding was too much work. Just too much work to make cereal. Some even suggest they're too lazy. Ooh, notice that word choice. Well, cereal companies could go, oh, just so well. But that's no good now, is it? Does this mean all the other breakfast food companies are in trouble if even cereal is in trouble? Well, company can't just assume the titles are entirely accurate. After all, these websites need to make a living and will purposely make titles to get someone to click and read. They are marketing themselves in their article. One major question to determine then what alternative hypotheses might be true, that is, what do you think is going on, is to ask, but then what are millennials doing instead? Are they eating nothing, no breakfast? Are they having other food at home besides cereal? Are they dining out? There's a big difference between too much work in general versus what it seems, if you look into it, is too much work for the payoff of cereal. Many are opting for either warm, more time-intensive breakfasts, so warm food, more nutritional to-go breakfasts, or other to-go options. There's two different streams of behavior that have grown, and you have to take a look to see if it makes sense for your organization and how you want to respond. So the the phrase too much work helps us better define what does it mean to be convenient for this group of customers. You yourself can keep looking through the references to find the actual studies. Even after we look at the actual studies, you need to always consider what else could have gone wrong or could be the limitations for this data. So in sum, whether a study finding uses a clickbait title or not, you need to approach each news article and other secondary source and its content with great care. So now let's consider quantitative and qualitative data. In effect, each data will let you do different things. If you have what's called qualitative data, it's data that's meant to be about things, what something is, such as what people said, what people did, who were they with, how they are actually doing something, and so on. For qualitative data, it's content and categories that matter. Content and categories. These let you see what types of actions tend to occur together and what patterns of doings or sayings emerged. We're looking toward meanings, experiences, and relationships. By its nature, it's pretty subjective. But that's not a bad thing because that is our world. A lot of it is our wisdom. If you have quantitative data, it's data that's meant to be about how much or how likely, such as how many times people ordered something or how much. This is the data that's meant to be organized and analyzed by, say, one-way frequency counts, crosstabs, and other computations. For quantitative data, numerical distinctions are what matter. So you're looking toward values, differences, or trends. So these are really good at telling you how much or how likely. Note, you can also treat some sorts of cheap qualitative data as quantitative data, such as by counting how often perhaps someone mentions the word cheap when talking about a food. But in sum, qualitative data, you gotta remember, is very good at answering what are the actors, actions, and stuff, and how are they connected. Meanwhile, quantitative data is just very good at answering how much and to what extent. Another important consideration is what's called sampling. Who and how much information to collect. So we remember how an important part of research is learning something about our target market, the external environment, or what have you. It's usually not feasible to ask or observe every single person in a potential target market or study every single supplier transaction. Instead, we take what's called a sample. So sampling is a research procedure where we select a sample that is a subset, so little subset here, of the larger population we want to know about. So we want to know more about this big population, so we take a sample. The sample should be representative of the population in terms of what you want to know about. And I know you're probably going, really? Are you sure? Will only a subset do? Well, sampling is not just about picking any subset of the population. Instead, we select the sample based on what we want to know and we want to do with the data. So if you get what's called a representative sample, where every element of the population has an equal chance of being selected as part of the sample, then you're better able to generalize your findings to the larger population. If the sample is not based on a larger population, then you can only say with great certainty your findings apply to that particular group. If you want to learn more about what's out there, as with types of stories, experience, or ideas, you may want then a sample based on particular characteristics instead. So it's very specific what you want to know as to how you actually choose what to sample. So here's an example. I want to know more about whether a particular population is positive toward our VR headset brand so that I can project our likely market share. And so this suggests we want a sample so that we can generalize to the larger VR headset market population. In other words, by looking at what a sample says or does, we want to be able to see what the larger population might do. This means we want a sample that is largely representative of that overall VR headset market, where aside from being a smaller number, say, 4 out of the however many these are, the relative distribution of types of people will be about the same. So if there's about 35% of the full population would rate they despise the new brand name, then we're hoping we see largely a 35% whatever number for our sample. Here's another example of a problem in the sample. I want to know more about what types of things and stories a particular population thinks in regards to VR headsets. So this question tells you want to learn the breadth of what your population might think about. We don't necessarily want this subset to be a distillation of the larger population. We'd be asking that later, but not yet. Instead, we want to know, broadly speaking, what kinds of ideas are out there. For example, we can consider effectively where you want to get either different kinds of customers rather than knowing strictly the exact number or extent those customers exist. That's for the other one. So this one is all about the different kinds of customers within the market as you think are relevant. You may want, for example, beginners, technology aficionados, gamers who like action, gamers who like horror, teens, middle-aged men, and so on. Basically, you're using what's called purposeful sampling. Big idea is the breadth of what you learn. So in sum, sampling is important because time and money limit our ability to study the whole population. Instead, we take a sample, a subset of the population. Your research question determines how much you need to make sure your sample is representative versus purposeful. So let's go ahead and do a quick little example. The following page has a video clip from The Simpsons to get us thinking. It has a good lesson about what it may mean when marketers select not only our data samples, but also how we segment our customers. But you're thinking, okay, why a clip from an old TV comedy? This episode is a way to explore the marketing concepts and show how to keep tabs on the debates in modern culture. It's important to be proactive about what marketing and your marketing activities may mean to different individuals, groups, and organizations. Satire, such as a given through comedy, is a major form, for example. It's key to immerse oneself in the contemporary culture that we're a part of, as opposed to us versus everyone else attitude. So as a background, the episode I'm going with will be Lisa versus Malibu Stacy. So The Simpsons, this TV show, comedy, which often pokes fun at current events or pop culture, and in Lisa versus Malibu Stacy, basically the episode Lisa, let's see, where's my mouse? Is right here holding the cat. She's an 8-year-old little girl, and she gets a Malibu Stacy doll, which is effectively the world's parody version of Barbie. This doll is one of the talking models, and excited to hear what Stacy has to say, Lisa's horrified to learn that Malibu Stacy says a lot of things that show a very limited view on what girls like or can do. Things like, I wish they taught shopping in school, let's bake cookies for the boys, and don't ask me, I'm just a girl, and nay and giggle. For some of you, you may know or remember the original incident where Barbie got into trouble for this when their doll said things like, math class is hard. So you may take a look at the clip. So Lisa has just failed at trying to get Malibu Stacy, the company, to listen to her, and Grandpa is also feeling a bit marginalized. Grandpa Simpson is Abe right here. So let's put on our marketer's hats. What should this say about what we do? So go ahead. Alright, so hopefully you saw the 16-second clip, or you could just read the transcript right here if that's a little too tricky. So hopefully you thought of things like, needs and wants. What's the difference? Ethics. Should we be giving everyone what they want? The societal marketing orientation? I suppose on the bright side, Homer could go back to eating a bag of pure sugar with a grapefruit as a spoon, but some of you like to consider, do we always have to listen to what the customer wants? So let's think of some ideas in terms of segmenting now. So we can see that this could be an issue just looking to Homer if they're only seeking certain segments in their research and thinking that their answers will apply to everyone. So the needs of 18 to 49-year-old men may not well explain what an 8-year-old girl likes, or an 8-year-old man for that matter. And it's definitely an issue too if companies may also be failing because the 18 to 49 male segment might not actually be as descriptive as they think. After all, especially if you take Homer, Homer is probably not like your average 18 to 49-year-old male. I'm pretty sure. I'm looked at your discussion boards. I'm pretty sure, especially you gentlemen out there, a lot of you aren't like Homer Simpson. But then again, something to talk about for segmenting and for sampling, this may be a good idea to focus on Homer if you know you're basically going for big enough snack customers or others like him, or they're just big eaters, or that you know that Homer buys so darn much you might as well try to see. That data of just picking Homer may in fact be a good thing. So something better might be those with big appetites who like mixed texture in their snacks, or whatever it was that Homer liked about nuts and gum. One final thing to note though is this may fit, but we gotta think long term usually. If companies only limit themselves to the needs of particular segments, it may be very bad if no one ultimately serves Grandpa, Simpson, or Lisa. So, major takeaway from this is, remember, our decisions do have consequences. How we conduct our research will produce data. The data is not neutral. We make choices. It will produce decisions that affect the lives of people. It's one thing that, of course, if we purposely choose to focus only on a target market of people like Homer, and therefore asking only like people like Homer was appropriate to understand the types of products that are by that target market. So again, just thinking about it, we try to go beyond where, well, what types of 18 to 49-year-olds do we like? Is Homer an accurate representative of this? Is it better to ask others more directly? So, big ideas. There may be situations where just studying Homer is a good idea and nuts and gums might be the next big thing. But we gotta do our due diligence and consider Homer not necessarily as a default, but take the time to make sure that we are interviewing him because it makes sense. So we talked about the data itself and what we might want to find. Now let's talk about the methods themselves we use to collect this data. Here's a good rule of thumb. I'll go over each method in a few slides, and as noted, first slide, the what is it and its pros and cons. This is content you gotta know. You gotta know what it is and some pros and cons. Second slide is usually how you can actually use it. That slide you can focus on it if you'll actually use it, so it's based on your judgment. What methods will help us actually collect the data we want becomes our big question. So let's take a step back. What does selecting a research method have in common with Pokemon, sports, battle strategy, and budgets? Got an answer? Well, hopefully it might be something along the lines of trade-offs. Each comes with a set of strengths and weaknesses, and you only have so much time and money to commit. You also need to commit before you fully know what's happening, those conditions of uncertainty. So coming out of the class, you should be able to select a method, explain its strengths and weaknesses relative to your marketing research problem at hand. So remember, collecting data usually involves studying actors, say a population, behavior, they're doing something, and a context, so a place and time, a setting. It's difficult to get the full story on with each research method because any one research method usually doesn't get all three in equal measure. So here to end this section are a few additional examples of what we might not get what you're looking for when you're doing research. So first, customers don't like looking stupid. They do not want to look stupid. They try very hard to protect their identity. So this picture is from a famous study by Solomon Asch, and what they did was they studied conformity. They had a group come in, and they would make selections like what line matches a sample line. Little did one person know, all the other people in the room were to choose right at first, but then they're in on the experiment. They switched to voting for the wrong answer right in the middle. These and other studies find people don't like to look stupid and try very hard to protect their identity, so you got to account for that. Next, consumers may be influenced by the researcher, the setting, and other factors. So for example, are you wearing a lab coat or jeans? So if you're talking to a group that favors getting messy or being casual, they may not take you seriously if you come dressed in a fancy business suit. And many studies tend to note that if someone's got a doctor's or a lab coat, they seem more credible. Another issue you often see is customers often want to help you. See, look how happy that cat is to help you. And they want to give you what you want and what they think you want to hear. For example, I was doing my fast food research, and a participant was certain I was interested in health ramifications, so she kept trying to steer the conversation to that topic. She thought she was helping me, when what I needed was just her point of view. I was much more interested in her use in daily life, in fact. Other issues you might have is, well, think grumpy cat. Lots of deliberately false or silly info might be given, or memory and words may simply fail your research participants. They may just not be able to remember. Another issue is customers may act differently in their natural habitat if they know you are there, and they do tend to figure it out. Customers also may not like or want to be watched. Often there are expectations of privacy even in public spaces, both on and offline. And social influence may be a major factor in how we do research. As you will see, there are plenty of different pros and cons at each research method, and we'll be going over those each respectively. So I know you probably saw that there were a lot of these, and don't panic. Effectively, I just split up a whole bunch of methods apart so that you can pick and choose and jump around more easily. But for now, that's a few major ideas on sampling, quantitative and qualitative data, primary and secondary data, and of course, a couple of other pitfalls when it comes to research. So next section, again, we'll be going more deeply into the respective data collection methods. I hope you're having a good day otherwise, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks very much for listening, and this is your instructor encouraging you to run with these ideas, or run as much as you can as if there is a bear behind you.